Welcome to Cannabis 360, and I'm joined today by Joel Brown. Joel, thank you for joining us today.
No problem. Thanks for having me today.
Really excited to have you here. Now, Joel is a area sales manager, territory manager for ReadyCan, and we're going to be talking today about that common transition that we see from Budtender to brand ambassador, and we'll touch on the territory manager role as well a little bit here. So, Joel, I wanted to start off tell us a little bit about your journey into the cannabis industry. How did you get into this in the first place?
So my relationship with cannabis, like many people, goes back any number of years. But I come from a little bit of a different background per se. I was actually working in the culinary field for the past 18 years or so, up until the start of the pandemic. And going back 7 years from today, I was a medical patient and I was going through chemotherapy at the time, and I had to avail myself to some sort of other alternative medication on top of my chemo that would help me manage some of the symptoms. And cannabis kind of came through for me in the clutch. And my doctor at the time was like, "Hey, you can't be smoking it, but you're a chef, so you can figure it out." And so I began cooking with cannabis. And when I was a chef, I was really laser focused on ingredients and kind of the source, their history, like their uses, all the things that you can do with them. And cannabis was always that one ingredient that I came back to. I kind of rabbit holed in on that one and spent the past 7 years studying it, researching it. I ended up going to AAPS, a great pharmaceutical college here in Toronto, where I took the cannabis management edibles program. And I'm currently a student of the Gangier program, which is a cannabis sommelier certification in the States. And from there, after graduation, I worked as a budtender in downtown Toronto for a little under a year at Civilian House of Cannabis. And somewhere in the middle of that, I was contacted by a recruiter to see if I was interested in joining the team at ReadyCan. And I've been working as an area sales manager since last August.
I love it. Yeah. Really interesting journey there, kind of coming at it from that medical perspective first and getting introduced there, but with that chef background. I know we're gonna have some future conversations on kind of the edible side of things, which I'm super excited about and to get into with you. But yeah, today we're talking about that brand ambassador role and kind of how you transition from that budtender role to eventually becoming a territory manager, which is really cool. So yeah, can you kind of start off by just briefly describing what a brand ambassador is, what's involved in that role, and then kind of touch on as well your current role as a territory manager and what that entails, and I guess some of the kind of key differences between the two.
Yeah, certainly. So a brand ambassador is kind of like the first step that a lot of people make in the cannabis industry if they're working in a budtender position to working directly for an LP. And I've seen it as kind of like a natural progression or trajectory for some people working on that retail side. If you're working on retail, you're either going to stay in retail and work yourself up to either a management position or perhaps even open your own store or a number of stores. But for those people that are interested or find an LP producer that really vibes with them, something that they're really, or a brand that they're really attracted to, they may reach out to them or vice versa and represent that brand out in the field. And to that end, like a brand ambassador is essentially that connection between the licensed producer, the retail stores, the bud tenders, and the consumers. So you're kind of like a conduit for the brand. And to that end, you have to have, quite a large depth of product knowledge, especially on the brand that you're representing. And you really have to have that kind of you're not really so much selling the brand. You don't work in that capacity as much, but you're representing the brand and telling that brand story. And so I think some of the key differences between, say, a brand ambassador and a territory or area sales manager is likely one of the first things you'll be doing is executing on activations, pop-ups, showing up at trade shows, this sort of thing. And for example, we do pop-ups with ReadyCan, and we do pop-ups kind of all across the country. And when we're doing them, our brand ambassadors are interacting with consumers and guests of retail stores, and they're telling them the story of ReadyCan. And so the difference between that and say what I do, I kind of do the same thing, but I'm really working directly with the store managers, with the bud tenders, and really working from a point of education, helping them make, good choices for their stores based on our products, on things that fit. And it's a little bit more in depth with the admin, especially on the territory manager side. Like you're gleaning all of the information that you can get from the field, be it competitive, be it how well your products are doing, be it things that you could be doing better as an LP. And you're taking it all back to what we call the mothership.
I love it. Yeah, it's I mean, it makes sense because of all the marketing restrictions and getting the brand out there. It definitely makes sense that there's kind of this ground level strategy that's involved where you need to kind of deliver that message, deliver that story directly to consumers, and there's really kind of no substitute for that in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean, we really speak to that, right? Like the last 3 feet are the most important. The last 3 feet before a sale between your POS and your customer, like that's really where you execute that sale. And it does stem between, I'd say, perhaps like 75% to 80% of sales that happen out there in retail stores. It's really because of something that the bud tender has been educated on, or the bud tender is smoking or trying at home. That's really what sells out there. And so by putting ourselves in the stores or connecting with these teams and these bud tenders, we're kind of able to give them a bit more knowledge on our products. So perhaps in that last 3 feet, they're able to influence a purchase at that end.
Absolutely. And why do you think it's so common for companies to recruit bud tenders as brand ambassadors? Like, what makes that transition, or what are some of the kind of key traits that they're looking for?
Yeah, so when I first started in cannabis retail, I was just kind of overwhelmed by the amount of brands that were out there, the amount of products that were out there, all the kind of information. But little by little, day by day, I did get to know the market reasonably well, just by virtue of making sales every day in the shop. And I think that that's probably like one of the big reasons is that you just garner so much product knowledge in the time that you're working on the retail floor. You get to know actually what customers are talking about, what they're actually interested in, what products really work for them, what things that they're trying out. You can kind of see the trends as they come up because you're seeing it all happen in real time. And so that product knowledge is invaluable. And when I first started, a lot of the reps that I would cross paths with, they came from other industries. Like they would come from either bev alcohol or other forms of, I believe it's called CPG retail, like consumer packaged good retail.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a little bit different because cannabis in and of itself, it's not just a CPG. Like I really refer to it as agricultural magic. Like it is really something special. And to be able to talk about that product in a really fulsome way, you have to know it. And the people that really know it, it's the bud tenders out there. So they're perfect in that position because they also learn really great sales techniques when they're on the floor. And those translate to when you're talking with retailers, when you're talking with other bud tenders.
Yeah, and sort of knowing like retailers' pain points, right?
Exactly.
Like working on that level. And so then when you make that transition, I can see that like you already know kind of where they're struggling, where they might need help with. And so you can kind of direct that conversation pretty easily.
Yeah, it gives you a degree of empathy to their situation and to just kind of the day-to-day of running a business that perhaps you might not find in someone that comes from another industry.
Mm-hmm. And now, so, bud tenders, like like you just described, can make that transition to the brand ambassador role, but I'm sure there's some kind of gaps potentially in knowledge that are out there, right? So from your experience, like, what do you think is sort of the biggest challenge for a bud tender making that transition to like a brand ambassador type of role generally?
So I mean, like, my background really, like I worked in a kitchen for, going on almost 20 years. And then I did retail for the first time in my life. So there were a lot of gaps in knowledge for myself right at the beginning. But I think at first it was really just taking in the job itself and learning how to manage my time correctly. When you're working in retail, you have a pretty standard 9 to 5. And the days after a while, like they become relatively routine. But when you go on to this side of the world, it's not routine at all. There's a lot of variances, especially when you're working as an area sales manager or territory manager. You have to build your week in a certain way at the beginning of the week, but by the end, it could have changed like 100 times over, just because there's various needs of stores that you got to attend to. There's meetings that come up with store owners. There's activations that happen on the fly. Yeah, so it's a juggling act. So really, like, I think that self-time management, because you are essentially, like, the way that we describe it is that we're working as our own kind of CEOs of our own territories. So you really have to be in charge of kind of everything and be well organized. So I think that that's probably a bit of an adjustment for some people that haven't kind of worked independently in that sense before.
Very like self-motivated, right?
Exactly.
Because you're
Yes.
really like independent. There's not much. I mean, it depends probably what company you're working with, but there's not a
Sure.
ton of necessarily like oversight constantly on your day to day, right? Like
Correct.
you're very independent. You're deciding kind of which stores you're going to visit. And I'm sure there's some structure to that, right? Especially with a
Yes.
company like ReadyCan that has a good footprint, is well established. But yeah, definitely being self-motivated seems like a very kind of critical component of it.
And I'm super lucky to be at Redican. Like we have an awesome team. We really support each other. Anytime that we're encountering pain points out in the field, we relay these to each other. We have ongoing conversations. And to be frank, when I'm out in the field too, and I see other sales reps out there, like we chew the fat, so to speak, and we kind of get to know each other a bit and to see how well, like, what's going on with their product out in the market. And you can really learn a lot from those conversations as well.
Yeah, like it's kind of speaking to that support system, like there seems to be, at least that I've noticed, and kind of what you've described, is that there is that transition from Budtender to brand ambassador to area sales manager to territory manager. There is kind of that natural progression there. And so yeah, can you speak a little bit to like kind of, how that support system works and how that kind of development happens with ReadyCam, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, so I guess like in terms of like developing people in that way, we had a really great success story with one of my colleagues, Hannah, that I work with here at Redican. So we both attended AAPS and studied the cannabis program, and I actually reached out to you and I'd asked if you had any star students that would be a great fit for a brand ambassador role here at Redican. And she really knew the product. She really knows everything about the retail side of the industry. And so she was able to really take charge of her role as a brand ambassador, and she showed a lot of initiative. And so when a position opened up for an area sales manager, she was one of the first to be interviewed. And obviously she did very well at the interview, and now she's doing really well out in the field. And so I think it's really like if you're able to show that kind of drive and initiative and passion, and also that willingness to continually learn, because that's something that happens with a lot of people when they get into a position. They're like, okay, I'm here, and I don't have to learn anything more. We're continually challenging each other to learn more.
That's awesome. Yeah. Big shout out to Hannah. Definitely when you reached out, I knew kind of right away that she was going to crush it. So it's really awesome to see that she's kind of made so much progress in a pretty short period of time.
Totally.
Now, sales and marketing there's a wide scope to it, obviously. And obviously there's like, from a Budtender perspective, there is an element of sales to that, retail sales, right? But outside of that retail context, like how much kind of experience is needed, or how much did you need to kind of evolve and adapt and kind of learn that side of the industry? Again, outside the marketing and sales, kind of outside of a retail context.
Yeah, it's again, like that was something that kind of took me a little bit by surprise right at the beginning. But because I came from that retail background, sales on a retail side versus sales with budtenders or retail store managers, as long as you're kind of like, you're touching on like some of the key sales techniques that you picked up in that field, like I think the big one that we all kind of forget is listening intently. And so that's kind of the first step. So if you're able to listen to someone intently and then follow up and ask the right questions based on the information you received, and like really think on it and really ruminate on it, and together working with that person, you're able to kind of uncover their needs, their budget, kind of what their decision making process is. And from there, you've built a really great rapport just because you've really gotten to know them and kind of what they're looking for. And so I had those conversations every day when I was bud tending. And so flipping that over to talking to a store manager now with the knowledge, as you said, like of their pain points of what they go through on a day to day, being able to relate to them and build that rapport. That was like, it was a pretty easy transition. The harder parts of that is kind of managing the data, the KPIs, the admin surrounding those sales. And so while you're listening and you're building that rapport, you're also having to really absorb all of that information, retain it, and then be able to report on it so that you can demonstrate later on whether or not you've influenced that sale.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. The CRM, as you would say, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That was I think that was probably one of the trickiest transitions, because at the very beginning when I started, the way that we reported on our day-to-day was a little bit different. And then we adopted a new customer relations management program, a new CRM. And learning that was really hard for me because, I'm about to be turning 36, so I'm not as technologically savvy as I once was. So
yeah,
I was definitely pulling my hair out at the beginning, but after a month or two, and after talking with some people who are a little bit younger and more mentally spry than I am, they were able to point me in the right direction there.
yeah, I'm almost there as well with like TikTok and stuff, just taking off. I'm like, I think I'm too old for this. You know what I mean? Like, yeah.
TikTok, is that a
It's
I don't know
a
what it
new,
is.
yeah. Don't worry
Okay,
about
cool.
it.
All right,
Yeah.
cool. Thanks. Yeah.
Cool. Well, no, that's great. And then I guess finally I wanted to ask, like, any kind of advice that you could give to bud tenders that are looking to make that transition, that are maybe looking to jump into that brand ambassador role. Any advice that you could give them, skills that they can develop and work on kind of in their current role potentially?
So after a couple of months of working on the retail side, I met a lot of reps, and I met a lot of really passionate, phenomenal people that were educating others about their products in a way that was like infectious and engaging. And I saw them doing this, and I thought to myself, God, I want to do that. This seems awesome. Seems like a great job. And so after a while, when they started to visit, I would just talk to them, and I kind of get to know a little bit about their day to day. And at first I was very apprehensive. I think we had some conversations about this like early on in my career butting. I was like, yeah, I don't know if I've got the chops. I don't know if I have the sales experience. But after talking with a few of them for a while, they're like, hey, listen, like you've got the passion, you've got the drive. Then those are two things that you can take and probably find yourself in a role sooner or later.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a big one. Talk to your reps, get to know them, get to know a bit more about their job, just so that if you do find yourself in an interview for a brand ambassador's sales manager position, you have a knowledge of what the job entails, for one. Two, I always like, even when I was like, I wasn't really looking, I was still kind of looking. You're always on that job hunt. You set alerts in LinkedIn, you set alerts on Google Jobs for jobs that you may or may not be interested in. So you can set something up, an alert for like a brand ambassador, and it'll pop up. And sometimes you'll get lucky and you'll see a company or an LP that you really like, and definitely apply for that role. Even if it's something that may or may not be out of what you believe to be your experience or out of your depth, like at least try.
Mm-hmm.
And number three, there's a lot of great recruiters out there. I worked with Canmar Recruitment. I think they're located out in Vancouver. And there's also the White Ash Group, to name another one. And there's a few others out there that at least you put your resume or CV into their hands, they might be able to pair you with an LP that works with your experience and backgrounds.
Yeah, speaking of recruiters, another shout out to someone I've been following a lot on LinkedIn recently who's giving a lot of great advice is Stephanie Powell. So she has just like a lot of like resume tips and she does a lot of recruiting in the space as well. And yeah, I think what you said too about like finding the right company, right? Like finding a company that you're interested in, that you're passionate about. I mean, that's just kind of the perfect fit. I always think that like the brand ambassador kind of role is made so much easier if like you're a fan as well, right? So yeah.
When I got the call to hear that it was Redecan asking, to hire me, I was like flabbergasted because I've been a fan of Redecan since day one. Working as a chef, I was always decarbing my own cannabis, infusing my own oils. And it was really like I was really shooting in the dark, hoping that I was nailing my consistency and my dosage every time. But then came around this like little beautiful bottle of a perfectly lab tested, easily dilutable oil, the raindrops, and I've been using them ever since. And then the Reddies, the cigarette stop pre-roll, that also it's one of my favorites.
Yeah, which you guys just did like the large pack, right?
The King Pack, yes, the carton.
Yeah,
we got a few more hitting the market before the summer.
Super cool, nice. And well, we got 420 just around the corner. I wanted to ask, like, any kind of exciting things planned that Redecan has planned for the big day?
So in a few days before 420, on the 15th and 16th, we're going to be one of the vendors at the Toronto Cannabis Expo, which is happening at Parkdale Hall down on West Queen West in downtown Toronto. And then on the day of at 420, we're going to be activating all over Ontario, a number of locations. I'm going to be activating at Cannabis Streets up in the north end of the city, and then also at a couple of Tokyo Smokes, one in Cumberland in Yorkville, and then one on 333 Yonge, the flagship location at Yonge and Dundas.
Nice. So if everyone needs to come find you and check you out, that's where you'll be, eh?
100%. Well, I'll be around all of them. I'll be running around that day. It's the high holidays, So
yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
Well, that's exciting. Well, good luck on that. Really excited to see all the kind of festivities happening for 420. It should be really fun. You said the Great Hall, right? Is where.
Yeah. So
nice.
Yeah, it's that's presented by I think one of the keynote speakers. We got Chef Pat Newton coming in. We've got Jackie Childs. She's going to be there. And it's presented by Ambrosia Cannabis, one of my favorite retail stores in downtown Toronto.
All right, Joel, really appreciate it. Thank you for sharing your insights, sharing what you do at Redecan. And yeah, we'll have to do it again, okay?
Looking forward to it.
All right, take care.
Take care. See ya.